Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into something truly harrowing. The crash of PIA Flight 8303 in Karachi back on May 22nd, 2020.
Yeah, it's a tough one. An Airbus A320, modern aircraft, experienced crew.
Exactly. And yet, 97 people lost their lives. We're using the official AAIB report, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board report, to really understand how this happened.
And the core finding, the really shocking part, is that the plane was fine, mechanically sound. This wasn't an equipment failure.
Right. It seems it all came down to, well, human factors and procedures not being followed, which is what we need to unpack.
It's a chain of events, starting well before they even saw the runway. The initial descent phase was immediately flagged by investigators.
As an unstabilized approach, what does that mean in this context?
Well, they started coming down from cruising altitude, 34,000 feet, but they just didn't manage the descent profile correctly.
So they were off the ideal path.
Way off. By the time they were about 15 nautical miles from the airport, they were still up at around 9,000 feet.
And where should they have been?
For a standard, stable approach, like a 3-degree glide slope, they needed to be closer to 4,700 feet. So, almost a mile too high.
A mile too high, 15 miles out. That's significant.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just manual flying issues. The flight management system, the FMS, which helps guide the plane vertically, it was actually contributing to the problem.
How so? What was confusing the system?
Basically, the crew hadn't cleared a programmed holding pattern at a waypoint called Sabin. The FMS still thought they might need to fly this extra loop.
So the computer thought they had more distance to cover.
Exactly. It calculated an extra 23 miles into the route. So the vertical path it was showing them was based on that longer track, trying to keep them higher for longer, effectively.
Well, in reality, they were trying to get down for a straight-in landing.
Precisely. And you hear this confusion on the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR. The captain apparently exclaimed something like, "What's going on? Stop. Take out the hold."
So they realized the FMS issue, but quite late?
Yeah, and critically, air traffic control saw how high and fast they were. They saw the deviation.
Did ATC intervene?
They did. At about 11.4 miles out, when the plane was still nearly 5,000 feet too high, ATC offered them an orbit.
An orbit, like just circle around?
Yeah, a standard safe maneuver. Circle once, lose the excess altitude and speed, get stabilized, then continue the approach properly. It was the sensible option, the reset button.
And the crew's response?
This is where it gets...
concerning.
The first officer replied, "Negative, sir. We're comfortable. We can make it, inshallah." Basically, no thanks. We've got this.
Comfortable, despite being so far off the correct profile.
Apparently. And there's a comment from the captain recorded shortly after, something to the effect of telling the FO that the controller will be surprised what we've done.
Wow. That suggests overconfidence. A determination to make it work no matter what.
That's certainly how the investigators interpreted it. High confidence, despite an extremely unstable situation. So instead of taking the orbit, they tried to source the aircraft down.
How did they do that?
They engaged open descent mode, or open DES, and put out the speed brakes. Open DES is, well, it's not for final approach.
Why not? What does it do differently?
It basically tells the autopilot to dive towards the selected altitude using idle thrust and maximum pitch down, controlled primarily by speed. It's designed for losing altitude quickly, not for the precision needed near the ground.
So a very aggressive descent.
Extremely aggressive. The report mentions descent rates hitting 7,400 feet per minute at points.
7,000? That's incredibly steep for an approach.
It's completely outside safe operating parameters. And inevitably, pushing the aircraft that hard triggered a whole cascade of warnings.
Okay, so they're diving towards the runway. What happens next? The plane's systems must have started reacting.
Oh, absolutely. First, the autopilot couldn't handle the extreme nose-down pitch. It exceeded 13 degrees, so it automatically disconnected around 2,700 feet.
So now they're hand-flying this incredibly steep descent.
Yes, and almost immediately they get the overspeed master warning, that loud, continuous chime.
Why overspeed?
Because they tried to deploy the first stage of flaps, CO and F1, while they were still going way too fast. About 31 knots over the limit for that flap setting.
Okay, so autopilot off, overspeed warning blaring. It's getting chaotic.
And then came the really critical ground proximity warnings, the GPWS.
The system designed to stop planes hitting terrain.
Exactly. It started with sink rate cautions, you're descending too fast, but then it escalated immediately to multiple urgent pull UP warnings, red warnings.
Pull UP. That's the most serious one, isn't it?
It is. It's a memory item. Crews are trained to react instantly, maximum thrust, pitch up, climb immediately to avoid impact. No hesitation.
Did they react? Did they perform the escape maneuver?
No. The report is clear. They ignored the pull UP warning. They just kept descending.
They ignored pull UP. How? How is that possible?
It's hard to fathom, but it leads directly to the next critical failure, perhaps the most unbelievable one.
What was that?
The landing gear. They were descending rapidly, below 750 feet above the ground, and the gear was still up.
Still retracted. But they're about to land.
Yes, and the aircraft knew it. This triggered another major red warning on the ECAM display. LG gear not down. And with it, another loud, continuous chime.
So now they have multiple loud alarms over speed, possibly still the pull-up, and now gear not down.
Correct. A cacophony of urgent warnings demanding action.
And their response to the gear not down warning, surely they lowered the gear then.
No. Unbelievably, the CVR recorded the captain saying words to the effect of, "Cancel it."
Cancel the warning.
Yes. They pressed the emergency cancel button on the ECAM panel. This silenced the audio chime for the landing gear warning, and likely the overspeed one, too.
They muted the plane while it was screaming at them about imminent danger.
That's what the evidence shows. They actively silenced the warnings to continue the unstable approach.
That just speaks volumes about their mindset, fixated on landing regardless of the state they were in.
Utterly fixated. The investigation confirmed they flew through all the stabilization gates 1,000 feet, 500 feet, grossly exceeding all criteria for speed, descent rate, pitch attitude. It was a completely uncontrolled arrival.
And the inevitable happened.
Yes. At 09.34.28 local time, the aircraft touched down on runway 25 LA, with the gear still retracted.
A belly landing.
A belly landing. And not a gentle scrape either. The engines took a massive hit. The report details scratch marks on the runway pavement from the engine nacelles over 2,000 feet long for engine 2.
That impact must have caused serious damage.
Catastrophic damage, as it turned out. The impact fractured parts of the engine casings, specifically around the gearboxes, the transfer gearbox and accessory gearbox.
What does that mean for the engines?
It means the oil starts leaking out rapidly. And without oil for lubrication, engine failure is guaranteed. It's just a matter of time.
But incredibly, even after that belly landing, they didn't stay on the ground?
No. They initiated a go-around. They actually managed to get airborne again.
How coordinated was that decision during the impact?
It seems completely uncoordinated. The flight data recorder showed the captain pushing the nose down as they hit the runway, maybe trying to keep it down, while the first officer was pulling fully back on his stick, trying to climb. Total confusion.
But they did get back in the air with fatally damaged engines.
Fatally damaged, yes. Almost immediately after lifting off, engine number 1 shut down completely. An uncommanded in-flight shutdown because it had lost its oil.
Okay, so one engine gone, but engine 2 was still running.
Initially, yes. Engine 2 was still producing thrust. Enough thrust potentially to climb away, circle, and maybe attempt another landing or at least maintain altitude for a while.
So they still had a chance, albeit a slim one, with one engine running.
They did. But then came the second, truly catastrophic human error of the sequence.
What happened with engine 2?
The first officer, seeing engine 1 failing, seems to have become confused or panicked. He was recorded saying something like, "Thrust lever number 2 ideal E, move number 2 to ideal E."
He wanted to idle the working engine.
Yes. And he apparently did. He manually pulled the thrust lever for engine number 2 back to idle.
But why? That was their only source of power.
It seems like a case of misidentification or extreme stress leading to a fatal mistake. He effectively shut down their only remaining thrust source.
For how long was it at idle?
According to the report, for nearly a minute.
A minute without significant thrust while trying to climb after a belly landing.
By the time they seemed to realize the mistake and tried to advance the power on engine 2, it was too late. It had also lost its oil due to the initial impact damage and was failing.
So dual engine failure became inevitable.
Yes. They finally declared Mayday, but they were losing altitude rapidly. Stall warnings started sounding just before the final impact.
And they crashed short of the runway.
Tragically, yes, about 340 meters short. This whole sequence, it just highlights this foundation of complacency, which brings us to the wider factors.
Right, the human and systemic issues. The report mentions the sterile cockpit rule. What's that, and how was it violated?
The sterile cockpit rule is fundamental. Below 10,000 feet, during critical phases like takeoff and landing, conversation must be restricted only to essential operational matters. No chit-chat.
Why is it so strict?
Because that's when pilot workload is highest. You need total focus on checklists, monitoring instruments, communicating with ATC, flying the plane accurately. Distractions can be fatal.
And Flight A330's crew.
The CVR confirmed they were having extensive non-essential conversations well below 10,000 feet. They were reportedly discussing the COVID-19 pandemic at length.
During the critical descent phase when they were already high and fast.
Exactly. That lack of focus likely contributed to missing things like clearing the FMS hold, properly briefing the approach, or even just noticing how dangerously unstable they were becoming.
Which leads to the breakdown in crew resource management, or CRM. That's the whole philosophy of crews working together effectively, right? Checking each other.
Precisely. CRMs is about communication, cross-checking, and challenging errors, regardless of rank. But the investigation found CRM on this flight was severely lacking.
Oh.
Required briefings weren't done properly. Warnings were ignored or actively canceled, not acted upon. And crucially, the report describes the captain's demeanor as bossy, dominant, and overbearing.
That kind of dynamic would make it hard for a first officer to speak up, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It likely contributed to the FO not challenging the unstable approach more forcefully, even though he did initially suggest taking the orbit offered by ATC. He was overruled, and the dominant dynamic probably prevented him from pushing back harder later on.
So the safety net of having two pilots essentially failed because of that power imbalance.
It's rendered ineffective. But the failure wasn't just in the cockpit. It went higher up, into the airline's oversight systems.
What did they find there?
The Flight Data Monitoring, or FDM, system. Airlines use this to automatically analyze flight data for procedural deviations or unsafe trends.
And what did the captain's FDM history show?
It showed a pattern. Numerous previous flights triggered FDM alerts for things like high speed on approach being too high on the path, high rates of descent, the same issue seen on the accident flight.
So he had a history of flying unstabilized approaches.
Yes. And critically, the data showed that many of those previous unstable approaches were continued to landing without performing the mandatory go-around.
Meaning the airline safety system flagged the risky behavior, but nothing changed. The behavior wasn't corrected.
It appears not effectively, no. The unsafe practice of continuing unstable approaches seems to have been tolerated, or at least not adequately addressed. It became normalized for this pilot.
Which just set the stage for this final, fatal instance.
It really did. When you put it all together, the complacency, the ignored procedures, the CRM breakdown, the lack of oversight, it shows the engine failure wasn't the root cause. It was the consequence of all these human and systemic failures. That a perfectly good plane and flew it into a situation where failure was inevitable.
It's just staggering, especially when you consider one final point from the report, which is almost too painful to contemplate.
You mean the landing gear?
Yeah. The investigators concluded that if they had simply put the landing gear down before that first touchdown,
the outcome would likely have been totally different. Yes, it would have been a high-speed landing, maybe some damage to the gear or tires from braking hard, but the engines wouldn't have struck the runway.
No engine damage, no oil loss, no go-around with failing engines.
Exactly. They probably would have stopped on the runway. It would have been a serious incident, an investigation, major questions asked, but likely survivable.
Wow. That one simple, basic action, lowering the gear, was the final link in the chain that led from unstabilized approach to utter catastrophe.
It really underscores how multiple layers of safety nets, procedures, warnings, CRM oversight failed.
It leaves you with a really unsettling thought, doesn't it? When the pressure is on and maybe the culture allows for shortcuts, how many warnings have to be ignored, how many procedures bypassed before disaster strikes. How do organizations stop that normalization of deviance?
That's the critical question, not just for aviation, but for any high-risk industry. How do you maintain vigilance and adherence to safety fundamentals, always?
A deeply sobering analysis. Thank you for walking us through the complexities of this investigation.
It's important these lessons aren't forgotten.
Indeed. And thank you all for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this exploration highlights just how vital robust procedures, open communication, and a culture of safety truly are. We'll catch you next time.